Today on With the First Pick, summer scouting continues with an early look at the running back class for the 2026 NFL Draft. I'm Ryan Wilson. That handsome devil there is former Titans GM Ran Carthon. This is episode 276. And Ran, I know you're dying to know we got 287 days until the 2026 draft. I know you don't care. In Pittsburgh, PA. In case you missed it, we've already hit our top 10 quarterbacks in this class and our top 5 wide receivers. You can check that out in the old podcast feed. But as promised, Ran, today is God's position, the running backs. How you doing, sir? Key West in the house.
Hey man, it's not many of us that make it out of Key West, so I got to represent today. That's the type of vibe we're on today. So, shout out to everybody in Key West.
Shout out to everybody in Key West, no doubt about it. All right, let's start before we get going here and the look ahead. Let's look back. Let's start by showing last year's top 5 when we did summer scouting, and this was with me and Rick Spielman and Mike Renner. This was our consensus with the first pick rankings. Quinshon Judkins was our number 1 consensus back. He was a second-round pick at the top of the second round to the Browns, and we talked to Andrew Berry about that earlier this summer. Rand Ollie Gordon, big back, ended up going in the 6th round to Miami. Doesn't feel like a Miami fit, but we'll see. Ashton Jeanty was somehow tied for 3rd with Trevion Henderson last year on our summer scouting list. Ashton was a 6th overall pick to the Vegas Raiders. Trevion went in the 2nd round as well, like his teammate Quinshon. He went to the Patriots. And finally, Marion Hampton, the other first-round pick at running back, went to the Chargers. I liked him a lot last year. Rick wasn't quite as high on him as I was, but that's okay. He ended up being a first-round pick, had a great season. I'll just ask you, of this list, Ran, who do you think is going to have the chance to be the most productive rookie given their respective team situations in the NFL?
I mean, I'll cheat and say Ashton Jeanty because he was the 6th overall pick. Is going to have the most opportunity. But if you scratch him off the list, you'd have to look at, let's say, Quinshon Judkins. Like, you got to put him in that role because you got to figure in no Nick Chubb. And so he's going to factor into the early running back count and carries, pretty quickly. And, I mean, that list is a great list. I mean, shoot, you got 4 out of the 5 guys were day 2 picks, day 1, day 2 picks. And even looking back and going through my notes, I had Ollie Gordon kind of in that same range of going 6th round last year. So, that's a great list, and we'll see where this list this year lands, and hopefully we'll be pretty accurate.
All right, let's take a sneak peek at this list. We'll do our individual rankings, Ran Carthon's and Ryan Wilson's, and then we'll mash them together to get the consensus with the first pick rankings. And I was telling you before the show, if you're listening here, Ran and I both have Jeremiyah Love number 1, but Ran has C.J. Baxter out of Texas number 2. He missed all of last season with a knee injury he suffered in preseason. I went back and watched him this morning when I saw Ran's list, and he's moved up the list for me. He's not represented on this graphic because it was a last-minute change for me. But if I were to rank him, he would be number 3, just ahead of Le'Veon Moss for me. Rand has Makhi Hughes, number 3, the Tulane transfer who's now at Oregon. And the 2 Penn State guys, shout out to Sharon and Stryker for the Penn State love. And I had my guy Rashul Faison at 4, the Utah State transfer at South Carolina. He's going to surprise a lot of people, I feel like, so I'm excited to talk about him as we get through the draft process. But Rand, before we get going and start with number 5 on our With the First Pick consensus list, I wanted to ask you what you look for in running backs, because I have an idea of what we're looking for. And I think once it gets to the NFL, producer Sharon, I don't know if you have the video footage available, because I want to see what Rand thinks about what my vision of a running back is and what an actual running back looks like. So this is week 2 of 2005 season. Bulldozer scoring from the 6-yard line. Handoff, Peyton Manning to number 35, Ran Carthon. First NFL touchdown in week 2. You scored your second NFL touchdown in week 2 the next year, so you only scored in week 2 apparently. But what's going on in this play here?
So this is a trap. This is a trap play. This game here was it was late in the game. I don't know if they put the time up, but this was late 4th quarter. I was the 4th running back that day and probably shouldn't have been playing. And so we were able to, score a go-ahead touchdown. And we ended up winning the game maybe like 10-3 or something like that. So first NFL touchdown. And then, like you said, scored the next year in week 2. Same play, trap against Houston. So I don't care what you think about me as a player. I really don't care because I got 2 NFL touchdowns that you can never take away from me. So there's
Amen to that, man. And I was telling Stryker, because I found that late. I said, because I was looking at your stats, because I was looking at the 2004 running back class, which started with Steven Jackson, who had a fantastic career. And I was trying to see if I could find your touchdown. And someone tweeted that out back when you got hired in Tennessee. So I was happy to find that clip. And Gus Johnson actually called that game. So what better way to celebrate your first touchdown than with Gus Johnson celebrating you? And then with us celebrating you here on With the First Pick, because we're one big happy family. All right. I just wanted to get your reaction on that because I thought that was sort of cool. Makhi Hughes, let's go to number 5 on our consensus list. He was my running back 9, and you had him at number 3. And no disrespect to Makhi Hughes, just how I rank these guys as I watched them. He's now at Oregon, was at Tulane, 5'10", 210 unofficially. He was the only show in town, or the big show in town at Tulane last season. 100-meter guy, but I won't tell you and Sharon his 100 time because you guys are nasty like that. 5.3 yards per carry, 26 targets, had 7 games of over 100 rushing yards, 1 game of over 40 receiving yards. I didn't think he was – I thought he was a solid back. He didn't strike me as being as twitchy as I would have liked compared to some of these other running backs. He felt like more of a zone scheme between the tackles guy, but you can correct me if you feel differently about that. Used primarily as a dump-off receiver in terms of running back routes, and then you give him the ball and as your dump-off guy, and then let him do the rest. Struggle a little bit in pass pro, but technically all these running backs seem to. What were your thoughts about Makhi Hughes to have you put him 3?
So initially, to start my list, he was 2 until I watched C.J. Baxter, late, and he was my running back 2. But to your point, I think he is a really good outside zone runner. I think he has just a knack for that. And if you look at what our league is right now, is a high percentage of everyone is running outside zone concepts. And so this guy has a workhorse mentality. He's a no-nonsense runner. He does a really good job of hugging blocks and staying tight to blocks. He just has a good feel, good instincts, good vision. And the most impressive thing about this guy is 523 carries at Tulane with 0 fumbles. Mm-hmm. And so that was the most impressive stat that I found. And I agree. There are instances and areas where he's going to have to get better, and that's like making guys miss at the second level, because I think he leaves some yards on the field just punishing guys. But the one thing that I went back and I just didn't have the time to study it and go back and dig a little bit deeper, but you rarely see him get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. And so that's something I want to go back and, for anybody that's watching this, if we post this on YouTube, drop it in the comments if you can find it. But I'll be interested to know in what his tackle for loss rate is, because in the games that I watched, which was Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Temple, he didn't get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. And to your point, him in the passing game, most of these young guys, when I'm watching them and I'm evaluating, all you have to do is show me you want to. Just show me that you want to block, that you want to put your face on people. I don't expect them to know the technique because they're not asked to do that. And even in terms of running routes, I just look for movement skills. And do you have the ability to cut outside your frame? Can you double up, make guys miss, and have the ability to catch the ball? Because in college football, you don't really see guys catch the ball a ton, which was one of the reasons why I really like Jaden Blue this past cycle as a change of pace guy, because you saw him run routes and you saw him, I think he had over 30, 40 catches last season. So I'm a big fan of Makhi Hughes. And I do think as the process goes, and especially in this Oregon offense, where it's going to be more spread and he's going to have more natural creases to hit it, this is going to be a guy that's going to rise on a lot of boards probably later once the coaches get their eyes on him, because he's a good fit for what teams like to do.
And Bucky Irving, last year they had a running back drafted. So they turned those running backs out in that offense. I didn't have a great comp for him. I'll throw it out there at you, and you can tell me what you think. Dylan Johnson out of UW a couple of years ago when they went to the national title game, who was more of a between-the-tackles guy. Maybe Makhi's a little bit more dynamic. Dylan played injured late in that season. That's part of the reason he wasn't able to help him as much as he had earlier in the year. But at 5'10", 210, I think he plays bigger than he weighs unofficially. But I don't know if you have a thought of someone who comes to mind in terms of who his game could be comped to.
The first guy that came to mind when I was watching was the guy we had in San Francisco, and Elijah Mitchell, that we took in the 6th round. Ooh. And prior to Elijah Mitchell getting hurt, our analytics numbers told us when he came out, he was the number 1 outside zone runner in that draft class. And if you remember, he makes the team. He was the backup running back behind Raheem Mostert. And in week one, Mostert goes down with a knee injury. This guy goes on, rushes for 100 yards, and leads the team with 900 yards rushing. Now, he's suffered injuries and dealt with injuries, throughout his NFL career. But when he's healthy, he's a load to bring down. And they're built very similar, compact, well-built, well-proportioned guys. And I think, again, 523 carries. I think he's got 40, 50 career catches, no fumbles. And you can see it when he runs the ball. He wraps the ball up, high and tight, and he carries it. And the other thing is that, you talked about his track speed. Like, I don't know what his track time was, but if I had to put an estimated 40, I think he's plenty fast. You don't see him really finish in the end zone on the long runs, but I think he's going to be a 4.47 to 4.48 guy.
Okay. Well, I ain't telling you or Sharon his 100 times, so don't even ask, because I don't want you to disparage that young man. All right, let's take a quick break here. Makhi Hughes in the book. Come back, talk about our number 4 consensus player on this list. And this guy was a lot of fun to watch as well. I can't wait to talk about. I'll tell you. Let's talk about Le'Veon Moss right after this break. We'll do that in just a minute. All right, Rand. Let's get to number 4 on our list. A young man I thoroughly enjoyed watching. He was injured after week 9 last season, so he didn't play the last month or so of the season. But Le'Veon Moss, I thought, did a lot of things really well, and super excited to see what happens when he's healthy this year. I don't think I mentioned it. I had like a day 3 grade on Makhi Hughes. So let's go back to that real quick. You think he's a day 2 guy as we sit here?
Yeah, I think he'll be a day 2 guy. And like I said, I think he's going to rise once the coaches get the tape and they really start watching him.
Yeah, and we'll see. Look, man, I'm wrong frequently, so I could be wrong about that for sure. Le'Veon Moss, I had him as a day 2 guy, late day 2 guy. As we sit here, 6'0", 215, unofficially. Ran sub 11 in the 100 in high school, so he can move a little bit. We'll see if he moves fast enough for you guys. 4 games over 100 yards, 1 game with 40 yards receiving last season. As I mentioned, just 9 games before he got injured. And it was a knee injury. Also kept him out of spring practice the year before. But I thought he was scheme diverse, long-waisted, made him look a little bit taller than even though his listed 6'0" frame. Plays with good vision, quick feet, lateral juice to make defenders miss in the backfield. Had a good jump cut. North-south guy who didn't, dilly-dally behind the line of scrimmage. And I thought he ran pretty tough. Ran running back routes with big play potential because of that yak ability. And, again, he's a get-in-the-way guy as a blocker. That's something we can work on. What were your thoughts of Le'Veon upon first viewing?
Yeah, so looking at my notes, there's a lot of good, because I take notes on everything that I'm watching, a snap-the-whistle view, and I'm writing a lot of good size. Good job of pressing a block, good route runner out of the backfield, good burst and quickness, good feel for zone blocking schemes, instinctive runner with feel, and he keeps the chains moving. Honestly, I hadn't heard of him until I saw your list and what you had done, so I wanted to just peek just so I could be able to speak intelligently about these guys. But for me personally, I had him at 6 below the Penn State tandem, but knowing that he only played 9 games last year after suffering a knee injury, I could easily bump him up to 5, knowing that now. Now, here's the trick. Looking at this graphic, 2022, 2023, 2024, 6 games, 9 games, 9 games. That's something to 2022 kind of speaks for itself, but why is he not playing full seasons? So is there a durability concern here? I don't know. Again, I got to do my research and study, but there's plenty good. And the one thing that really stood out for a guy this size, man, he can run routes and he knows how to get open and he can win one-on-one versus linebackers. So
it's interesting you mentioned the injury concerns because that's one of the questions I have. How does he bounce back from that knee injury from a year ago last season? And running back maybe is different than offensive line or cornerback. And I say that because it feels like you churn through these running backs. And just going back to your draft class, 2004, Steven Jackson played till 2015, but you look at guys that were drafted right after him. Chris Perry only lasted 4 seasons. Kevin Jones only lasted 4 seasons. Tatum Bell, and those guys were all top 40 picks. Julius Jones lasted till 2010. So my point is this. Is it less of a concern if a running back comes in with an injury out of college because you may only get him for 1 contract anyway, unlike, say, an offensive lineman that you take top 5 and you want him to be there for 10 years?
It really depends on the construction of your team. I just remember, I want to say this was the 2013 draft class when Eddie Lacy came out. I think it was Eddie Lacy and Keenan Allen. And our medical department at the time was kind of, couldn't really sign off on their medical because of their injuries. And, one of the things I learned is, you have to have a plan for the future. But in order for Eddie Lacy to make it to a second contract, or even a Keenan Allen, those type of guys, like, you as the GM have to get to your second contract. I'm here with you right now because I didn't make it to mine, so I couldn't be too concerned. You have to, put yourself in position to win those games, and then you worry about the second contract when it gets there.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's a good point. Focus on the present, and then the future hopefully will take care of itself. All right, I'm going to give you a super rich comp for Le'Veon Moss, and you can laugh at it. Someone in the comments from last week said Ryan's just begging for someone to love his comps. That's from 2 years of trauma with Rick, who hated every single comp I had. So I want to hear your comp. But the one that I came up with, and this is top tier summer scouting comp, a little Breece Hall.
Like that comp just because I think they're two different running styles. I think Moss runs considerably harder than Breece. I thought when Breece came out of Iowa State, I thought if there was nothing there, he wasn't just going to attack those dark spots, right? Like, you saw it more when there was space and he could get out and use his speed. Again, this was the guy I didn't finish. I watched the Notre Dame game, the Florida game, and I still have the LSU game to finish on him. But the one guy, and I'm just talking about coming out and just ability, I kept seeing a lot of Frank Gore in his running style is what I saw. So that shows you how much I like him. I played against Frank in high school, played against Frank in college, and Frank is a dear friend of mine. But again, I had him at 6, could easily bump him to 5 after this one more game of watching, but I saw a lot of Frank Gore.
It's interesting because if you look at this year's draft class from 6 weeks ago, there were 25 running backs taken in that draft, which seems insanely high to me. I didn't go back and check recent years in terms of how many running backs went. 2 in the first round, of course. And then, not surprisingly, a ton go 4th through 7th round. So it feels like even though we might love some of these guys, and Ollie Gordon perhaps is an example last year, had him as a top 100 guy, ended up going to the 6th round. It would not be necessarily surprised if some of these guys slip for whatever reason. Usually, if it's not injury related, it's because there's a run on offensive tackles, quarterbacks, cornerbacks, and positions of need. So even though we both love Le'Veon Moss, would it be the biggest shock in the world if he were somehow to go at the top of the 4th round? I don't think so. What do you think about that?
No, and I think you're spot on, because as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about Frank's journey, Frank tore his ACL in college and had other knee injuries, and so he slipped into the 3rd. And so this guy, and again, not realizing what his medical had been, 4 games, 9 games, 9 games, he could be trending in that same area because the guy has talent, but the durability could be a concern. And like you said, that could cause him to slip to round 3 or 4.
Or he could have himself an Ashton Jeanty type season and turn on the afterburners, and then he goes from tied for 3rd with the first pick consensus. And by the way, you were no part of that, so you don't have to take credit or blame for that, to being the 6th overall pick. So it could go any number of ways. That's what makes evaluating these players so much fun, and that's what makes college football so much fun. And I'm glad we get to talk about it now. Just give ourselves a little preview. All right, Ran. 2 guys down. Texas A&M's Le'Veon Moss. We talked about Makhi Hughes, Tulane, now at Oregon. Let's take another quick break. When we come back here, we're going to get to your guy, and who might not be, I might adopt him away from you because I really like watching him play. Got to get him healthy coming off a knee injury. But when we come back, we'll talk about redshirt sophomore CJ Baxter out of Texas right after this break. All right, Ran, number 3 on our list of summer scouting running backs, a consensus with the first pick, CJ Baxter out of Texas. And as I mentioned at the top, he was not on my list. He missed all of last season as a true sophomore because he suffered a knee injury in training camp. And I went back and watched 2023 tape this morning, and that was a fun ride. Unofficially 6'1", 230. And it's funny because I'm going to give you the floor and let you talk about your guy because I don't want to steal your thunder. But he's bigger than Bijan Robinson. He's a little bit bigger than Roshan Johnson, who was in the backfield with Bijan a few years ago, and they both got drafted. Obviously bigger than Jaden Blue, the Texas running back who was drafted last year by the Cowboys. But he is, as an 18-year-old, when we watched him in 2023, I don't know what he looks like now. Maybe he has room to add some weight. But one of the things that stuck out to me in doing a little research on him, he's the first true freshman to start an opener for UT since Ricky Williams did it in 1995. And Ricky Williams, obviously, fantastic college player, had a really good NFL career. So there is a lot to like about CJ, and it's always fun watching these guys who surprise you a little bit. And let's start here. Any concern about the knee injury a year out, or are we just going to wait and let this thing play itself out because there's no reason to overreact in July?
No, there's absolutely concern because it wasn't just a clean, ACL and LCL, and it happened during training camp. And having a daughter who's rehabbing a torn ACL and meniscus right now, you kind of know what that is. And I've been speaking to a ton of former players and ton of current players who are recovering from that injury. And all of them have told me that you really don't feel like yourself for a full year. And so, the fortunate part for him, it happened in August. And so we'll know in August he'll be a full year removed from the injury, so he should be back. But you talk about impressive. This guy, and you mentioned his size, 6'1", 225, 230, whatever it is, very good size. He's got quick feet. This guy has home run speed. That was the one thing that you don't give him credit for. This guy can run. He's got contact balance. He's a physical runner. And like you said, he was 18 years old in 2023, 17, 18 years old in the film that we were watching. And so he stood out enough for me to feel like he was my number two back in this class if he comes out. And you would think because he suffered the devastating injury that he suffered, that if he has success this year, he's coming out. He's not going to risk it. He's not going to risk the opportunity of it getting hurt again. But this kid is very, very impressive, man. I'm so excited to watch him play. He has the it. You mentioned when we were off camera, he can catch the ball. Now, there are things that shows you that he's a freshman, and that's pass pro. The pass pro stuff is ugly right now in terms of his recognition and just feeling it. But he's a patient runner, sometimes a little too patient. You like to see him hit it and get it. But this guy is impressive, man. I'm excited to watch him because if he returns to form, we're looking at a high-level guy that is just going to have for a first-round consideration.
Yeah, it's fun watching a player that you don't know nothing about, and you keep having to stop and make more notes because he's doing things that you didn't expect him to do. I thought his change of direction behind the line of scrimmage was, for that size, it was like plus. Like, it got your attention. It's not Ashton Genty, but he's also not 5'8" and whatever Ashton weighs, but his movement skills, you talked about his patience sometimes being too much, but I appreciated the fact that he just wasn't running up the back of his lineman. I thought he ran well in both the zone and gap schemes, and there was a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what he could be now, going to be a year removed from that injury. That made me think of something, by the way. So I talked about all those Texas running backs that have been drafted in recent years. I didn't mention Jonathan Brooks, who's a second-round pick of the Panthers, who tore his ACL his last year at Texas, and then unfortunately tore it again once he finally got on the field as a rookie for the Panthers. And as someone who's torn their ACL, not as a professional athlete, but just as a dummy playing rec sports as an old person, it does take a while. And I think part of it, and I would imagine Jonathan Brooks might tell you this, part of that's mental. Is there anything that teams would do to help a player overcome that, or is it just a matter of the player having to trust himself and knowing that his knee is 100% healthy in terms of the healing factor, but mentally they may not be quite there yet?
It's funny that you say that because, again, in my daughter's recovery from ACL, I've hit up a ton of players and spoke to one current player, Curtis Robinson, linebacker in San Fran, who was going through it. He had actually had the same exact injury as my daughter, and he told me that was the biggest part for him, in that the mental part, knowing that there was going to still be pain, there was going to still be some discomfort, and doesn't mean that it's not healed. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It's just something that you got to push through until it gets better. And so the guys that I've talked to in recent times about it, they told me that, to encourage my daughter that at this point, it's just the mental part. You just got to get over it, and that's what CJ is going to have to work through. And I just want to throw this part in there because we keep saying, the running back from Texas. He's a Florida boy originally. He is from Orlando and went to Edgewater High School. So Florida, we got to claim our own, and we got to also find a way to keep our own in the state because, my God, this dude is talented and should have never left the state of Florida.
Yeah, I was going to say, we could make a whole all-star team of guys that did not go to Florida and went elsewhere. Fernando Mendoza will be the starting quarterback, who's going to be at Indiana. We talked about him. C.J. Baxter, and Gators might be able to use him to talk about him. I didn't know you guys counted Orlando as part of Florida, South Florida guys. That counts?
No, it's a part of Florida. And so I'll tell you this: within Florida, we got our own, little beefs that we talk. But when we're out of the state, you're from the crib. That's all that matters. You're from the crib. And now, if you're in Florida and you say you're from the crib, that means you're from South Florida. But if you're out of the state and you say you're from the crib, then everyone knows that means you're just from the state of Florida.
It's like here at the family reunion, everyone's related. But once you get outside the family reunion, you go out, you at Target walking around and people start talking smack to your cousins, then you're all on the same team again. I got you. No disrespect to Target. That's just the first thing popped in my head. Maybe it could be anywhere. Kmart, wherever you go and you get your stuff. All right. Big thanks for CJ Baxter. And again, it feels like I don't want to overstep here. I think if he plays the way we think he's going to play, he could have a better season than Jonathan Brooks before he got hurt at Texas. Is that too rich for you? And I say that with the understanding that he has a chance to be a top 50 pick.
No, and I personally think if he returns to form, he'll be a top 32 pick because I think he's that good. I think if he's healthy and he returns to form, he's going to be a top 32 pick. And I think in recent years, he'll be the second best back coming out of there since Bijan.
Oh, I love it. And we showed the graphic earlier, but he was my number 3 on my revised list after you mentioned his name to me. So we'll see how this plays out. But we're going to take another break, and we're going to talk about finally get to the Penn State guys, Producer Sharon. We can talk about your guys, and we'll start with Nicholas Singleton, who returned to school, sort of surprisingly. One more year with the Nittany Lions and Drew Aller. We'll talk about him right after this break. Big Ten Fast. That is how Ran Carthon describes the Penn State running back room. It's hugely disrespectful. Producer Sharon's a Penn State alum, so he's just taking shots at him. He's mad because the Florida Gators aren't where they once were. We all can't score touchdowns in week 2 of the 2005 season, Ran. So let's just keep a level head about this. Nicholas Singleton, number 2 on the consensus list. He was my number 2A player before I saw C.J. Baxter, number 3, and he was number 4 on your list, Ran. Unofficially 6'1", 227. I have him as a day 2 guy right now. We can certainly talk about that. He was an absolute workhorse in that backfield along with Kaytron Allen. And I'll just say this, and I'm going to say the number out loud, and you can determine whether you think that's slow or not. High school 100 time for Nick Singleton, 10.89. And I know you guys are hemming and hawing. I didn't hear anything from Producer Sharon this time because it was a Penn State kid, but Producer Sharon would have beaten him in high school, according to Producer Sharon. But, and you talked about this during the break, nothing that necessarily stands out, but he does a lot of things really well at a high level, makes very few mistakes. He was targeted often in the pass game. He even caught a touchdown pass from the tight end because the tight end did everything for that team. And then, of course, Drew Aller was on the receiving end of a lot of throws from him. Had good hands. One of the touchdowns he had against Bowling Green early in the season, he ran a little from the backfield, ran a little seam route and caught red zone touchdown. Hands catch, didn't have to use his body. So a lot to like. He came back for a senior year. And I'll ask you this. When you talk about running backs and mileage, as an evaluator in the league, looking to add talent to the running back room, would you prefer they have fewer carries in college and get those carries once you get into the league? Or are you unconcerned about that just because it's a running back by committee approach now in the league?
Well, no, it's kind of double-edged, right? So you prefer for the guys to not have a ton of mileage, and especially if you're going to take them high, because that's the long-term investment of it. We talked about Makhi Hughes earlier having 523 carries in 2 seasons. Well, Nicholas Singleton, he was short of leading the team in rushing by probably less than 20 yards last year, but he only had 172 carries. And so that's not a ton of carries. I think Jahmyr Gibbs coming out, I think he never had more than 150 carries in a single season, and we see what that's become. But to your point, the league right now is becoming a committee approach because you only have so many, Saquon type guys. But what we talked about during the break, and you've mentioned it so far with Nick Singleton, like he does a lot of things well. There's nothing that really jumps out in terms of his calling card, his trait, and some of these guys we've talked about have that one particular trait and thing that they do really well. But the one thing I liked about him the most, I liked the fact that he was a 3-down back, guy that you can leave in on all 3 downs, which I think was where he separated himself from Kaytron Allen in terms of the 3rd down value. And you talked about that seam route. I think he scored on that same play against Oregon during the year where, kind of a Texas type route where it turns into a seam. And then Aller was able to hit him, and he's a natural hands catcher. Again, pass pro, I think he's willing, which was all I needed to see because he gets good, solid initial pop. He just has to learn how to fit his hands to sustain and finish. The one game that really kind of threw me off a little bit, again, I watched Oregon, Boise State, and Notre Dame, was the Boise State game. I didn't think he played well at all. I think I saw a lot of mental lapses during that game. It seemed like at one point he was kind of checked out of that game, and he went the wrong way one time on the game, and I think that just kind of threw him off. But again, this backfield as a whole kind of reminds me of Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. I don't think they have the speed that those two guys have, but just in terms of two guys that don't need a ton of carries to be productive, and they just feed off each other. Right, because you have some backfields that they share, and they may not necessarily like each other, right? Or they're trying to get their yards and do what's best for them. But you can see these guys play in tandem, which is a cool thing, and why Nick Singleton came back, because they feel like they have something to finish at Penn State. Because most guys with his production probably would have left early and took a chance, in on their NFL status. But you can tell those guys have a relationship. So that's why I say, don't have a particular comp for him, but their backfield together reminds me of Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, minus the speed.
And the other thing, right, and the other thing is that there were 25 running backs taken last year, and that's part of the reason Rashul Faison returned to college. And we're not talking about him today, but we will going forward. But he has a relationship with BMAC, and BMAC and I spoke with Rashul back in December about the pros and cons of coming out, and it made more sense for him to go to school, get some NIL money as well. So I understand that. I want to ask you and circle back to something you just mentioned, that Boise State game in particular with Singleton's performance. In your eyes, he seemed a little off. So when you bring that up at the Combine interview or the Senior Bowl interview, wherever you talk to him, what's the answer you want to hear? Because, we all have off days, but what answer do you want to hear? What answer do you not want to hear? And I would imagine some version of blaming someone else for his mistakes.
Yeah, I just want to see you take ownership. Just take ownership for it. Whether you believe that or not, try to fool me and just say, hey, I just didn't play well. I went the wrong way on play 59, and it just got in my head because I knew better, and then it just led to, led to a little bit of a spiral. But I got it back together, blah, 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 blah. But don't come in, well, the bus was late, and then that threw me off my routine, and I got in, and the equipment room didn't have my socks, and then I didn't have my lucky towel. Like, all that stuff is excuses, and I don't want to hear it. And I will tell, the player in particular, like, hey, all right, that's enough. I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? So, but again, I think this kid is a good, solid, productive player. And we've talked about it before in previous episodes. The best compliment you can give a guy is that this guy's just a really good football player. And that's what Nick Singleton is.
I agree. Yeah, he's a lot of fun. And like I mentioned, I was sort of surprised he decided to come back, but I'm sure Penn State was certainly happy to have him. His teammate, Kaytron Allen, was number 5 in your list. I believe he's a little lower on my list. He's not as dynamic in my eyes as Singleton, but he's a solid running back. He's certainly going to get drafted. And my favorite fun fact about Kaytron Allen is that his mom calls him Fat Man because he was 12 pounds when he was born. What are you hoping to see from this duo in terms of helping them both get the most out of their final year at Penn State in terms of taking that next step to the NFL?
I really hope and hope that they just put the team on these two guys back. Love Drew Aller, love what he can be, and we'll talk about that at another date. Some stuff that I've seen late on the tape that wasn't as encouraging for me, but this backfield is your calling card, James Franklin. Like, put it on these guys' back. We don't know what they're going to have at receiver. The receiving core that they had last year probably wasn't up to Penn State standards. But you got two highly productive backs that are getting 1,000 yards each in the same season. Put it on their back. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be sexy. We don't have to throw the ball up and down the yard. And I know you got incentives for leading the nation in offense and passing. Put it on these two guys' back. It's going to shorten the game for you. It's going to rest your defense, and it's going to allow you to make plays. And it's going to make your quarterback better with the play-action game. So, personally, I would just put it on these two guys' back. And I love the fact that Kaytron's mom calls him Fat Man, because you can kind of he's a thick, low to the ground built dude. You know what I mean? And so I could easily see why moms would call him Fat Man. So I can't wait to meet him, because I will actually call him Fat Man first time I see him.
You know, we talked about this during the quarterbacks, but I'm going to bring it up again. If you have Drew Aller, potential top 15 pick, put the game in his hands. Why do we need? You can have balance. Don't get me wrong. You have to sling it around the yard, but it just feels like, you know, when you have, and look, man, maybe this is the same situation as Justin Herbert at Oregon, where the offense was such that you didn't get to see the best of Justin Herbert. Is that a better assessment of what perhaps Drew Aller is going to be going through, or did go through last year, or is the situation where, you know, he should be Caleb Williams out there, but he's only handing the ball off and throwing the ball 10 times a game?
For time's sake, because I hear Sharon, I'll just say, give me these two backs over the quarterback.
All right. By the way, Trevor Pena, wide receiver coming from Syracuse to help out Drew Aller and these running backs. You're welcome, producer Sharon, because we're going to miss him here in Syracuse, but he had to get that money. I appreciate that, Trevor. All right, let's take another quick break here, and we'll come back and talk about number one on our list. And it should be no surprise to anyone who half pays attention to college football, because this young man is truly special. And, of course, we're talking about Jeremiyah Love, Notre Dame, and we'll talk more about him right after this break. All right, Rand, it's that time of the show. Number one on our list of running backs, the consensus with the first pick, summer scouting, Jeremiyah Love out of Notre Dame. Battled injuries last year, 602-12 unofficially. I have a first-round grade on him as we sit here. He obviously plays running back, but they can line him up outside. He can play in the slot. You can put him anywhere. 10.500 in high school, so that's a little faster than some of the other guys we talked about. Also a long jumper. That athleticism shows on tape. I thought that his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield made him even more dynamic. And it's hard to come up with a comp for him, so I won't do that right now. But let's start here. In terms of the recent running backs taken in the first round, we can include Ashton Jeanty, who was drafted this year, and Amarian Hampton, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan a couple of years ago, Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. Do you think he deserves to be in that conversation, or is he perhaps a tier below, and how much of the injury does affect your opinion of that?
Well, I mean, obviously we've seen him come back a little bit after the injury. We have footage of him playing post-injury, and that same explosiveness. I think it was in the playoff game where he had that big run or maybe just before. I don't remember which game it was, but he had that run coming off of the injury. That was a 90-something yard run, and so the speed and explosiveness is still there. So less of a concern. You just want to see him put it all together and play a full season. But I think he's a better back than Najee Harris. I think their styles are different. Najee was more of the Le'Veon Bell, patience, hard, rugged running, chain moving type. But this guy here has the explosiveness. Like you said, he's got very good size. He's got very good speed and acceleration. He can catch the ball well. There's a lot of things that he does really well. He finishes runs. He falls forward. He's patient. He's RB1. And before watching C.J. Baxter, it was Jeremiyah Love, and then it was a tier. Everybody else was a tier below. And I do think C.J. Baxter is a little bit closer, and will flirt with pushing Jeremiyah Love for RB1. But I think this guy's head above, the rest of the group. And again, 163 carries on the season and 17 rushing touchdowns. I think he had 20 total, because I think he had 3 receiving. That says a lot about this guy's production in the amount of games that he played, I'm not a math major, but whatever the ratio is from carries to touchdowns, I believe it's pretty high. comparative to what everyone else has. So this guy's easily hands down RB1, and I don't, it won't be. I think he'll run the table from start to end as run RB1. But I do think C.J. Baxter is going to push him.
So Marion Hampton was the 22nd overall pick, I believe, of the Chargers. Do you think that's the range? Because I think he's a little better than Omarion, but Omarion's a fantastic player, but I don't know if he's going to be 6th overall pick level like Ashton Jeanty was. But again, a year ago, we had Ashton Jeanty tied for 3rd, not you, but with the first pick folks. So it feels like bottom half of the first round as we sit here. Does that sound closer to the truth? Again, 287 days before the draft?
I think probably by the end of it, just because of the value people put on running backs. Now, I will say this. If Ashton Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, and Quinshon Judkins in the second round and Travion Henderson in the second round, if those guys go out and have productive years, then these running backs are going to get bumped up because people aren't going to wait and say, hey, we can always find a back. I do think this guy will go first round. I do think this guy probably has top 15 talent, if you're being honest. And I would say I agree with, even though I wasn't with the first pick last year, I didn't have Ashton Jeanty as a high-rated guy for me coming into the season either. But we see what a productive, like crazy statistical year can do for you. So if Jeremiyah Love goes out and rushes for 1,800 yards and puts the ball in the paint 20 times this year, then he'll be in consideration for being a top 10 pick.
Fair enough. And, some of these questions are silly this time of year, but I'm just curious to your thought process as someone who's been in the league for nearly 2 decades. One of the notes I made, I want to get your thoughts on this, because sometimes we see running backs who, when they have to stop their feet behind the line of scrimmage, can't get going. That is not Jeremiyah Love. When his feet stop, he has to redirect. They get 0 to 60 at the very next step, it feels like. How important is that in terms of evaluating a running back to fit whatever your scheme may be? Because that feels like it solves some problems you don't have to worry about if you have a slow-footed running back who can't get going again once he has to stop.
No, that's key. That's the name of the game for the running back position. And that's what you talk about with, I'm looking at it now with Kaytron Allen. He doesn't have elite burst or top-end speed when I'm speaking about Kaytron Allen, but he has good feet. And so he can get in and out and dance out of things. And for Kaytron Allen to be a bigger guy, he can create when there's nothing there and find a lane and bounce it. And this is what Jeremiyah Love is. I mean, we had a guy like Derrick Henry who you knew you had to get to his 5th step to get going. And if you could stop his feet, then you had a better chance to tackle him.
Yeah. But I don't, 5th step, 4th step. If you got to the 5th step, you might as well just get out of the way, because Derrick Henry is not someone you want to get in front of. By the way, we've talked about pass protection and these running backs not being great. Jeremiyah Love will blow you up. Like, if he sees a blitzing linebacker, he will pick him up and put him in the dirt. And I appreciate that. Again, to your point, you can coach these guys up to do that at the next level because they're not asked to do it a lot as feature backs in college. But I appreciated the fact that Jeremiyah Love took that very seriously at his time at Notre Dame. So looking forward to that. All right, Ran, it was a good little stroll down running back memory lane, seeing you score your first touchdown. Maybe next show we'll show the 2006 touchdown in week 2 against the Texans. But that's it for our running backs. Going to continue the offensive line conversation next week. I think we're talking offensive linemen and tight ends in the summer scouting series with the first pick. So in case you missed it, quarterbacks in the podcast feed. Did wide receivers on Tuesday. Just did the running backs. In the meantime, you can check out With the First Pick wherever you get your podcast. Scan that QR code there. For Ran Carthon, I'm Ryan Wilson. Thanks to producers Ron. And thanks to all you guys who watch, listen, and comment. We will see you in the next one.